In 1931, a psychologist named Winthrop Kellogg and his wife Luella brought a baby chimpanzee into their home. Her name was Gua. She was about 7.5 months old. At the same time, the Kelloggs had a young son named Donald, who was around 10 months old. Their plan was unusual, controversial, and today, deeply uncomfortable. They wanted to raise Gua and Donald together, almost like siblings. Same house, same food, same routines, same affection, same tests. The question was simple. If a chimpanzee was raised like a human child, how human could it become? At the time, this was connected to one of psychology's biggest debates, nature versus nurture. Nature means the traits we are born with, biology, genetics, instincts, and the structure of the brain and body. Nurture means the environment around us, parenting, language, learning, culture, and experience. The Kelloggs wanted to know how much behavior came from biology, and how much came from your upbringing. So Gua was not kept in a cage like a normal research animal. She lived inside the family home. She wore clothes. She ate at the table. She was held, taught, and tested alongside Donald. The Kelloggs observed both of them closely. They measured memory, reflexes, balance, strength, problem solving, emotional reactions, and obedience. In other words, almost everything Donald and Gua did became data. And at first, Gua seemed to be doing extremely well. In many early physical tasks, she developed faster than Donald. She climbed better. She balanced better. She reacted more quickly. She learned routines faster. She could respond to simple commands like come here, kiss, and no. She learned to drink from a glass. She used a spoon. She recognized people and daily patterns. To an outside visitor, Gua may have looked almost like a strange, hairy toddler. And that was exactly what made the experiment so fascinating. It seemed to suggest that environment had enormous power. Gua was learning behaviors that a wild chimpanzee would never normally learn. She was adapting to a human household. She was copying the people around her. But there was one major limit. Gua could not speak. This was not because she lacked intelligence. Chimpanzees are intelligent animals. They can solve problems, use tools, form relationships, and learn from observation. But spoken human language depends on very specific anatomy and brain development. Humans have vocal structures and neural systems that allow speech to develop in a way chimpanzees do not. Gua could understand some sounds. She could connect certain words with actions, but she could not produce human speech. And this mattered because language is one of the biggest differences between humans and other animals. Human language is not just copying sounds. It allows people to describe the past, imagine the future, ask questions, explain ideas, and build culture across generations. A child does not only learn words. A child learns that words can represent the world. So while Gua could imitate human behavior, she could not fully enter the human world of language. Then the experiment took an unexpected turn. The Kelloggs had been asking whether Gua could become more like Donald, but Donald began becoming more like Gua. He started copying her sounds. He used gestures instead of words. He imitated some of her movements and behaviors. This worried his parents. Donald's speech development appeared to be slower than expected, and the Kelloggs became concerned that the experiment might be affecting him. The study had been designed to test whether a chimp could be humanized, but now it seemed possible that the human child was being influenced in the opposite direction. This is one of the most important parts of the experiment. It showed that environment really does matter. Donald and Gua were both shaped by the world around them. Gua copied human routines. Donald copied chimpanzee behaviors. Both young minds were flexible. Both were learning from each other. But the experiment also showed that environment has limits. Gua was not becoming human. Donald was not becoming a chimp. They were influencing each other, but they were still developing within the limits of their own species. A baby chimpanzee and a human baby may look similar in some early stages of development. They can play. They can learn routines. They can form bonds. They can imitate. But they are not on the same developmental path. Chimpanzees develop quickly in early physical skills. Human babies develop more slowly, especially in movement and independence. But that slower development gives the human brain time to build a complex language, social understanding, memory, and abstract thought. So in the beginning, Gua could seem ahead, but Donald was developing for a very different future. After about 9 months, the Kelloggs ended the experiment. One major reason was concern for Donald's language development. Gua was sent away from the family home and returned to a private facility. Gua did not understand that she had been part of a scientific study. She did not understand nature versus nurture. She only knew the people, routines, and child she had lived with were suddenly gone. She had been brought into a human family, shaped by that environment, and then removed when the experiment became too complicated. Gua died not long afterward at around 3 years old. Today, the Kellogg experiment is remembered as one of the most unsettling studies in developmental psychology, not because it was violent in an obvious way, but because it blurred the lines between science, parenting, and ethics. The study did ask a real scientific question. How much does environment shape development? How much can learning change behavior? What separates human intelligence from animal intelligence? And those are important questions, but the experiment also treated 2 young beings, one human and one chimpanzee, as subjects in a test they could not consent to. That is why modern researchers would view the study very differently. Today, ethical rules in psychology and animal research are much stricter. Scientists must consider harm, consent, welfare, and long-term effects. The Kellogg experiment reminds us why those rules matter. It also teaches a deeper lesson about intelligence. Gua did not fail because she could not become human. That was never a fair standard. She was not a failed human. She was a chimpanzee, intelligent, social, emotional, and capable in her own way. The problem was that humans often measure animal intelligence by asking how similar animals are to us. Can they talk like us, use tools like us, follow rules like us, act like us? But intelligence is not only one thing. Different species are adapted for different worlds. A chimpanzee does not need human speech to be intelligent. Its mind is built for chimpanzee life, social relationships, movement, memory, problem solving, and survival in its own environment. The Kellogg experiment showed that nurture is powerful. A home environment changed Gua's behavior. It also changed Donald's behavior. But biology was powerful too. There were limits that training and affection could not erase. In the end, the experiment did not prove that a chimp could become human. It proved something more complicated. Living things can be shaped by their environment, but they cannot simply be turned into something they are not. Gua and Donald met briefly in the middle. For 9 months, they shared a home, a routine, and a strange kind of childhood. But eventually, their paths separated. Donald was a human child, moving toward language and culture. Gua was a chimpanzee, pulled into a human world she had never chosen. This is what makes the story so haunting. The experiment began with a question, can a chimp become human? But the better question is, why did humans think becoming human was the goal? Gua was already extraordinary, not because she was almost human, but because she was exactly what she was.